At FIE, we're not just
students
and faculty.
We're not only learners
and lecturers.
We are expanding minds,
Expanding futures.
We're redefining the classroom.
We are life-changing.
eye-opening. We are a community
Driven by our values.
That wants you.
you.
Yes, you.
To join.
Hello and welcome to In the Field, a podcast from FIE, where we will be exploring all things study abroad. I'm Dr. Heidi James Dunbar, writer in residence and senior faculty, and I will be your host. Joining me today is Dr. Graham Box. Graham's career has blended academic interests with a range of management roles, including business consultancy, running a national charity, and NHS management. He has taught at the University of Oxford and the University of Reading, and started with FIE in 2016. Graham's doctorate, completed at Oxford University, considered public policy responses to lifestyle illness within a framework of contemporary liberal theories of justice. He has recently published work on assisted dying in the Journal of Medical Ethics and in Health Policy, examining the positions of disability rights organisations and analysing recent Westminster parliamentary debates. Graham enjoys watching, playing and coaching sports and is a member of the England Korfball senior coaching team. He climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in August 2023 and will be trekking to K2 Base Camp in July 2024. Welcome, Graham. It's lovely to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Heidi.
I've just read your bio, and it's, as with all of our faculty, I say this all the time, but it's incredibly impressive. I think you must have the energy of at least 10 people climbing mountains, conducting really important research, teaching, sports coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think my central question is, what is korfball? I've never heard of it.
So korfball's the only mixed team sport. It was invented by a Dutch schoolmaster in the early 1900s who wanted a game that his class could play together.
Uh-huh.
So he came up with korfball. And it's based on sort of vaguely left-wing principles, cooperation and co-education. So those principles have kind of stuck with the sport ever since. So you can't run with the ball, you can't dribble with the ball. So that's promoting cooperation. And the co-education bit's obvious, that a team of 8 will have 4 men and 4 women on the team. And the way it works is the males mark the males and the females mark the females. It's a ball sport like basketball or handball, netball, but it's got some really interesting spatial aspects. So you can, the goal, the basket is 6 meters in from the back line, so you can score from the back. And I think it's the only sport I'm aware of where you can score from behind the goal. So there's all sorts of unique aspects to it. And I got into it because I went to a boys' grammar school, and to be honest, it was a way to meet girls as like a 15, 16-year-old. But I also love to travel. So Holland are the best country in the world, and they used to have lots of sort of twinning arrangements. So by the time I was 21, I'd spent 3 months of my life in Holland in korfball-related activities.
That's incredible. That is really,
Yeah.
really amazing. I've never heard of it. Isn't that ridiculous?
Well, it's very much a minority sport here. It's about 3,000 to 4,000 people play it in England. But there was, when I went to uni and a group of my friends went to uni, that expanded the sport geographically. It was only London and Kent before that. But we went to unis all over the country and started it in our unis. And then the unis embedded teams in their cities and towns. So it is played literally all over the country now, and in Scotland and Wales, which it never used to be. So the geographical spread's quite good. But the numbers are low, and we tried really hard to get schools to take it on because, it was designed for schools, but the schools have got so many pressures on their curriculum that, for them, it's not really been possible to take it on at scale.
But let's just go back there, because I think I heard another significant achievement that you're sort of hiding your light under a bushel there. So you and your friends together sort of helped the spread of this when you took it into your universities, and that's quite an extraordinary thing.
Do you know, looking back, it probably is, but it felt so natural. I can remember. So the posts were made out of scaffolding, 3.5 meters high. So it's quite a bit of scaffolding. And the only way to get these to our sports ground in Oxford was to take them on the bus. So I remember muscling this 3.5 meter length of scaffolding onto the bus with an American standing at the bus stop saying, "Gee, is this some kind of college prank?" And they just couldn't take us seriously. But we all thought that was normal, and we loved the social side of it. So that kind of kept us going. And it was fun. It was buzzy, and it was lively. We felt like we were getting somewhere.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting actually. A sort of sport I could have gotten behind, particularly as
Yes, yeah.
I went to an all girls grammar school too. So anything that would have gotten
Okay.
me out to meet boys, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, yeah. And it was one of the things I loved. It has a bit of a sport for all flavour.
Yeah.
So we had a university team, but people who didn't think of themselves as sporty could play for the university team. And the people we played against also, they weren't necessarily the best athletes in the university, but they just loved playing korfball, and we didn't turn anybody away. So as well, that sort of philosophically, that suited me well.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I sort of find competitive team sports, while I know everyone loves them and that's wonderful, it just doesn't work for my character. It's not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to look to see if there's one for ladies of a certain age around here.
There will be. They'd welcome you, Heidi, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so from there, you talked about university. What led to this illustrious and quite broad spectrum career?
I don't know. I've got lots of siblings. I used to say, "When are you going to get a proper job, Graham?" So I've done these different things. I think I did business consultancy because I was excited by the business world, and it gave me great opportunities. I did that for 5 years in Belgium and then in Portugal. But I did get bored with it, and that was what took me back to academia and to do my doctorate and teach at Oxford. And I think the stimulation of Oxford was greater than the stimulation of the business world for me. And I knew at that point that wasn't something I wanted to go back to. So I was a Citibank scholar when I did my doctorate. And there were some sort of conversations, but I knew in my heart I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to be in the financial services sector, even though Citibank were very, very good to me. But my mum was a telephonist receptionist in the NHS, and that was what I grew up with. She'd work nights. She'd come home in the morning and get us up, and then she'd go to bed. And I think my affinity for the NHS stems in part from what I saw my mum doing and how loyal she was, even though it wasn't a particularly senior role that she had there. She just loved the NHS. So I was keen to work for the NHS, and my research had been around sort of NHS-related matters. And I did 2 years in the NHS, 5 line managers, and it didn't suit me at all. It was constantly reorganizing itself. So that led me to work for myself, and that's what I've done for most of the last, 20 years or so. And I think that's who I am. I'm just someone who likes to move from one interest to another, kind of follow my nose a little bit. And then if I find somewhere I feel at home, then that's, as with FIE, I've been with you for 8 years now, then I'll settle there. And if it doesn't feel right, then I've got the flexibility and freedom to try something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love that you've done that, because I think sometimes people lack confidence or feel they've got to stay in one place, but actually it's really important to keep growing and like you say, following your nose, taking opportunities.
Yeah. That idea of having, 10 years experience and every year's been the same. I can't stand that thought. So I've taken some backward steps. I think I've done some roles that probably weren't very enhancing, but I think overall it's been a kind of, for me, an interesting and worthwhile trajectory.
Sometimes we have to take a sidestep to go forwards, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit more about what you teach for us? I know you're teaching ethical dilemmas at the minute. What's it like in your classroom, and what's that class about?
It's a lively class. It centres on a book by Rushworth Kidder, which is called How Good People Make Tough Choices. And I inherited that book. I hadn't read it before I took the course, and I really, really enjoy it. And Kidder's premise is that in the real world, we make lots of right versus right choices. There are 2 or more things that we want to do, and we can't do them all. And he says in the business world, that's very often the case. You want to keep prices low for your customers, but you want to pay your staff more. You want to look after the environment, you've got a responsibility to your investors. So these right versus right choices crop up over and over again. And what KIDA does is offer us a kind of methodology, if you like, to think them through ethically. So I think that's a great insight for the students, that we think of morality as right versus wrong. But what KIDA is telling us is actually that's not the case. Very often there are desirable things that we have to choose between. I think you could rewrite KIDA with wrong versus wrong choices, because I think often we're put in, places where neither of the options is very attractive, but we've got to go down one route or the other. So that's the structure of it. And the centerpiece of the course is for students to identify their own right versus right dilemma that they want to reflect on and think about. So should certain people be banned from Twitter? There are obviously arguments both ways with a subject like that. So their role is to think it through. So they write a research paper for me. They do presentations on kind of international organizations that are relevant to business. And then we think through, what are the drivers of ethical business conduct? Why would a business be ethical? And there are lots of them, and we kind of go through those systematically. Is it the right way to attract the best possible staff? Is it actually the most sustainable approach that's going to increase your long-term returns? Is it the way to keep customers happy? Is it required by regulation to an increasing extent now? So all of those kind of drivers, and see how they apply to the business world.
I know it's a very popular course, because the feedback we get every single term is incredible. And so I know that a lot of that is because you sort of do real experiential, real world learning. You talk, there's lots of debate and discussion. It's quite engaged. It's very engaged and dynamic, that class, right?
Well, I think FIE, I feel so lucky to teach with FIE because of its focus on experiential learning, among other things. And so the group this year they'll do a Sustainable London Walking Tour, which I've done several times before, which just flags up the kind of things businesses are doing to try and improve their sustainability practices. Then I'm going to take them to see the Lehman Trilogy. It's obviously a fantastically relevant play to business ethics, with the demise of the company eventually. And then we'll probably have a workshop on discrimination law, which is a really nice example of the ways that regulation can affect the way that businesses operate. And students, I think, really enjoy those kind of cases. Should a baker be required to bake a cake with a message support gay marriage? And all of the cases I use are things that have gone to court. So we've got the analysis of the court to kind of feed off as well. Should a bed and breakfast owner be allowed to refuse a double bed to a gay couple on the basis of their Christian beliefs? Should it be legal to force a partner to retire when they get to age 65 in a law firm? So those kind of real world problems, I think the students really enjoy thinking about that. And I learn a lot, because the American approach is slightly different from ours.
So really important areas that you're discussing, but also an important framework that enables us to think clearly through these dilemmas.
That's the idea.
Yeah. Brilliant. Now, I wondered if you might tell us some more about your research on assisted dying. It was quoted in the House of Lords and cited in the Health and Social Care Committee in the House of Commons, which is, I don't know many scholars who can say that their research has been quoted by both the House of Lords and the House of Commons. And I know it was looking at, tell me if I'm right, actually, but I understand this was looking at views of disability rights organisation on the legalisation of assisted dying. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more. What can you tell us about that?
So it's interesting how I got into that, because I was recruited to teach ethical dilemmas, business and the world, but then I was asked to teach healthcare policy and ethics. And the first time I taught healthcare ethics for FIE, I taught assisted dying. And obviously I'd read as much as I could before I taught it, but just absolutely fascinated by the issues. So many of the issues involved in it. Lord Judge, who was a former Lord Chief Justice in this country, described it as the most important moral and legal issue of our time. And I don't think he's far wrong in that, though. So it's been illegal in this country forever, really, but certainly since 1961, when the Suicide Act was passed. And in reading around it, I came across a number of people who claimed that disability rights organisations opposed the legalisation of assisted dying and gave the reasons why that might be the case. And it interested me because the cases that have been brought to challenge the law have all been brought by people with disability. So Pretty and Purdy and Nicholson and Conway and Paul Lamb, all of those people went to court because they had a disability and they had a reason they felt to be helped to die. So the research that I did with a brilliant guy in University of Ghent in Belgium, who's obviously got a lot of experience of assisted dying in practice because it's lawful there, guy called Kelly Schomberg, we decided to look at the views of disability rights organisations in the UK. So the law's slightly different in Scotland. So we did separate out England, Wales and Scotland, but that's a small point really. And we looked at, we got in touch with 140 disability rights organisations and said, please, can you tell us what your position is? Are you for it? Are you against it? Are you neutral or do you have no view? And of those 140, only 4% of them said that they were opposed to assisted dying.
Okay.
So that was the quantitative bit of the research, but we also did qualitative research, where through that process, but also through another process of looking at how disability rights organisations had contributed to public consultations on this, we drew together the arguments that they put either in favour of legalisation or against it. So there was a qualitative element and a quantitative element. And it was the quantitative element that people picked up on that really made it very difficult for anybody to claim that disability rights organisations oppose the legalisation of assisted dying, because the truth was that most of them didn't have a view. Very few of them were in favour of assisted dying, of the legalisation, but about 4% were neutral. And when we spoke to some of the ones that were neutral, they said, we're neutral because we don't want to offend any of the people who might want to use our services. We know it's a controversial subject. So rather than take a view for or against, we prefer to say we're here to support our members, whichever way this goes. So that was the bit that was quoted. Now we've moved on a bit from that, and the next bit of research we did looked at an analysis of assisted dying debates across nearly 10 years in the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the and Westminster. So 8 debates. I don't know how many hours that would have been. An awful lot of analysis, and we analysed it thematically, but there was a quantitative element to it as well. And what we were interested in was how people justified the position that they took, how members of Parliament and Lords justified their positions. And it was really interesting. We broke it down into anecdotes, authority statements, and evidence. So sometimes the basis of people's position was that they'd had an experience that made them feel very strongly one way or the other. Right. You know, they'd had a family member who committed suicide, or they'd seen someone die a dreadful death, or they had someone who'd considered ending their life and hadn't ended their life, and their life had turned out wonderfully for them. So those were anecdotes. Authority statements were people who said, you know, the British Medical Association opposes this, and they've got concerns, and so I've got concerns. And then the evidence was people who'd looked at assisted dying elsewhere and made a claim based on that evidence. And on top of that, then we had a very, very long list, maybe 70 or 80 arguments that we used throughout those 8 debates. So what we tried to do was just unpick the way that the argument developed. And part of the interest of that was to see if it changed over those 8 years. And it changed a little bit. So the people who oppose legalisation found it harder to say that there's no support for this, because increasingly there is public support and the professional organisations are more open to it now than they used to be. The people who support legalisation found it harder to say there is no slippery slope. So the concern is that if you legalise it, it'll just expand and expand, and there'll be more and more people, and it'll become a norm. And where it's been legalised, a lot of countries have done that. You know, it has increased. The laws become more liberal, or just more people have used it than was expected. So those are a couple of areas where the debate changed over time, but in the main, it was the same sort of core arguments that recurred. Sorry, I spoke for a long time then.
No, that's absolutely fascinating. And I think what that shows is, in these incredibly emotional and emotive subjects, clear-sighted, thoughtful, careful research and analysis is very, very important, because it just takes into account those emotive aspects, but looks at it in this broad, you know, analytical way. So it must be. And where do you think your research might go next? Do you have any plans for where you go next?
Well, we've just put in a book proposal, and it's kind of been me that's been driving it, but Ken is very supportive. But but it's been very, very hard to decide who it's aimed at. So most of our work's been academic work, but what we'd both really like to do is write a book with a wider interest. You know, that someone generally who wants to know a bit more about this would pick up and find readable. But it's not my natural writing style. So I've sent a chapter off to the publishers that we've got in mind, and I'm very curious to see how they come back on that. And they're open to it going either route. I think if we wrote an academic book, they might want to publish it. But it's just a question of, can we write something that's readable for people who are not don't have an academic background. So that's the next thing.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And good luck with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's just change the mood a little bit.
Okay.
And as you know, I ask everyone who joins me on here for their city secret. So now, can you tell me yours?
Well, mine's a very fresh secret, because I went to a jazz concert at somewhere called the World Heartbeat, which is near Nine Elms, just south of the River Thames, near Battersea. And I'd never heard of this organisation. It's a new purpose-built concert hall. It seats about 120, so it's quite intimate. And not only have they got this concert hall, they've got a recording studio. They do training for young people. It's a charity, and the concert itself. There's a pianist called Gwilym Simcock, who I really like, jazz pianist. Tim Garland's a very well-known saxophonist, and a drummer. That was the three, but they were part of a project that combined artwork with the music. So I think they got some Arts Council funding to do this art project to go together with the music, and it was something I've never experienced before, because you had artwork behind the music, and there was a link between the music and the artwork, which broadly speaking was about migration and immigration. And the person who led it was initially from Turkish, but had relocated to the UK. So that sort of multi-sensory aspect to it worked really well for me, and I just loved it. They were so friendly. Just a very, very welcoming, warm organisation, the kind of place you'd want to go back to. So it's called the World Heartbeat. I think they've got 2 venues, and this is the Embassy Gardens, the one with the concert hall in it.
The World Heartbeat. That sounds fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you. I've certainly never heard of it. So you have given us a good secret there. I'll put the link on the show notes for anyone that's interested. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today, Graham. And you have won the Dr. Rajani Pani Outstanding Faculty Award.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. That's pretty exciting.
Do you know, it is, but it's made me very self-conscious. It's made me think more about what I do, and I don't like that. I want to just get on and do it. But yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
Don't let it. It's a recognition of how valued you are as one of our faculty, and you don't need to do anything different.
Okay.
Just carry on being you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again. I'd love to chat to you again soon. Join me again.
Yeah. Thanks, Heidi.
To learn more about our faculty programmes and courses, go to our website www.fie.org.uk. And of course, you can always listen to other episodes of the podcast where I chat with more of our brilliant faculty. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed our podcast. FIE provides life-changing study abroad experiences in the UK, Ireland and Spain. As a non-profit educational organisation, we are passionately invested in making a difference for our students as the future global leaders of tomorrow and the field of international education as a whole. The FIE podcast is a creative and academic space for exploring everything, the people, the places and opportunities that make your experience so valuable and exciting.
FIE. We're here to help you
Unlock a wider
brighter future.